To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
Presented by Ebix Cash. हर खुशी के लिए काफी है.
Hello and welcome to the Business Today show. I'm Udayan Mukherjee. My guest today has worn so many hats in his lifetime. He's a multi-billionaire businessman and he's actually handled so many businesses over a period of 30-40 years. I've actually lost count. I mean, it's textiles, it's finance, it's pharmaceuticals, it's real estate. But his two big horses now seem to be finance and pharmaceuticals once again. In fact, he has actually announced a demerger of his business, of his group business, to focus on two separate finance and pharmaceutical verticals very, very closely. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome the one and only Ajay Piramal to this show. Ajay, it's great to see you again. Welcome, and how have you been?
I've been good, thank you, Dan. Good to see you back to a place where you really belong.
Thank you. And as I said in my introduction, Ajay, over the years you've done so many things. I mean, it started with textiles, which you sold off, that you got into pharmaceuticals in a big way and made a grand success of it, but you sold it off then. Then you dabbled with things like Vodafone, which you sold off, and now you've actually re-entered or entered finance in a big way with the acquisition of Diwan Housing. I mean, people who admire you would say you are an entrepreneur with a remarkable sense of adventure. But your critics might equally say that you're a businessman with an investor's mindset and not an empire builder's or institution builder's mindset. How would you respond to that?
So it's a fair question. So let's look at where we began. You talked about pharmaceuticals. As far as we were concerned, we entered pharmaceuticals in India in 1988 through the acquisition of a company called Nicholas Laboratories. And for 20 years, when we entered it, it was ranked 48th in the ORG, in the list of companies in pharmaceuticals. And when we exited in 2010, we were ranked number 3. So if that is not building a business, then I don't know what it is. It's not an investor, because we, during that period, actually invested a lot in growing the business through acquisitions. And we built it, and the reason why we exited it was because I look upon myself as a trustee for all our stakeholders. Our trust and stakeholders means it is our employees, our customers, society, and our shareholders. And I thought it was in the best interest of all these stakeholders that we exited at the time we did. So I wouldn't say that that was an opportunistic investment. I think it was, in my view, the right thing to do.
Fair answer. But you are re-entering. You have re-entered pharmaceuticals in a big way once again. And my question is not so much to do with the past, but the future. The way you are investing in finance right now, is it possible then that you will actually build this business, grow it, and you will not hesitate to sell it at some point? Or do you feel differently about the finance business today?
See, as far as let's talk about pharmaceuticals first, since you mentioned that. These businesses were small businesses even then in 2010, when we actually exited. We only exited the domestic formulations generic business. We had kept these were very fledgling small businesses, and we have grown it. Again, that shows in the last 10 years, we have been consistently growing this business. And so we continue to build on businesses. If there is a fault, if you would like to call it, it's that I'm not emotionally so connected. I don't believe my identity is with the business that I run. I think I have a separate identity. So to say that I want to build a empire which is in financial services or in pharmaceuticals, that's not my intention. My intention is to really, as I said, work in the best interests of my stakeholders. So coming to financial services as well, that's exactly the intention. And I know that in the future, it will be up to the next generation to decide what they want to do.
I will come and talk about the next generation in a bit later on in the show. But I just want to understand your game plan with the financial business, because so much of your investment and attention is now focused on that. I was looking at the history of your moves, and you actually were trying to cobble together something with your investments in the Shriram Group. Of course, you've sold off your investment in Shriram Transport Finance, but you still retain a large chunk of Shriram Capital, and there is a group reorganization which is going on there. Now, is there a play between Dewan Housing, Piramal Enterprises Finance business, and Shriram Capital, or do you see it as a conflictual business now, and you will have to shed your holding in Shriram Capital soon?
So in Shriram Capital, when we invested in it, our plan was always to be in the financial services business at that time as well. That was our stated strategy, because we believe that in an economy which is growing like India, we do not have enough of financial services businesses. And as you know, then that if the economy, nominal growth of the economy, at least 1.5 times is the growth of the financial services business. So consistently, I feel that in India, we need to have more entities that are in this space. And that's why we had invested in Shriram. And at one stage, we thought that ultimately Shriram, which was more in the retail business, Piramal had started a wholesale lending business, and we would have gotten together. That was the original plan. But that we thought later, as time went by, that it would not have been value accretive for either Shriram or Piramal, because both the cultures were very different, and it did not make sense for us just to make it in terms of size. And therefore, I have publicly said that a while ago, that we will ultimately disinvest our Shriram holding. We have done that in Shriram Transport, and at the right time, we would do so in the Shriram Capital and the Shriram City Union. As far as DHFL and Piramal is concerned, now it's become one entity. We have merged together, and now it's called Piramal Capital and Housing Finance, where the Piramal business and the DHFL business have merged together.
So this merged business, what is the eventual goal for it? Because a few years back, you did try to cobble together Shriram and IDFC Bank and probably head towards a fairly significant banking presence. Do you see your journey with DHFL after this merger eventually with the goal of having a bank, or is it something else?
So as far as we are concerned, we are building a solid, significant size business in financial services. Even today, if you look at it, the equity that we have in our finance business is almost 18,000 crores. If I add some of the unallocated equity, which we call in the parent, the 100% parent of Piramal Capital, it brings into a total of about 30,000 crores. So we have enough of firepower to grow this business as we want. Today, we are just working together to ensure that we build a solid, robust business, which is in line with what the Reserve Bank would want for a banking license. Then it's really up to the regulator, the RBI, as to what they think about it.
It is up to the regulator, but there are other ways. I mean, one is to apply for a banking license, and you probably need to demonstrate some track record before that. But going by the recent instance of Bharat Pay and how they got a license, you have other avenues available to you. Some public sector banks are coming up for sale in the next couple of months. If the government is to be believed, IDBI Bank will be sold off in the next 6 months or so. Would you be an interested party in these kind of transactions, which will automatically enable you perhaps to fold into a bank?
So as far as we are concerned, we are today focused on integrating what we've got today. The DHFL is a large acquisition, as you know. We have paid about 35,000 crores for it. So I think today we have to integrate it. And then at the appropriate time, we can look at the next steps.
How are you likely to position this finance business of yours? Because you, having acquired Dewan Housing, you have a significant presence in the housing finance market. But how would you like yourself to be positioned compared to, say, market leaders like HDFC or LIC Housing Finance?
So the way we look at ourselves is to have a business which has both retail as well as wholesale lending. We also have a business which is not only housing finance, but we would also go into unsecured lending, housing finance being mainly secured lending. And we would go into wholesale with both real estate wholesale and even other corporate wholesale. So that's how it is. It'll be slightly different from what HDFC and LIC housing is. And besides that, if I go into more detail, as far as our housing loans are concerned, they will be mainly in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. And whereas the HDFCs would have it in the larger cities. Second thing is that we would go for both salaried as well as non-salaried. Today, our composition of salaried and non-salaried people is about 50-50, which is in some ways higher than what the others would have.
Mm. There are two issues now, Ajay. One is that you don't have access to deposits yet in the way an HDFC may have because of the complications with the Diwan housing license for deposits. And on the other hand, you are up against these nimble fintechs who are trying to play your game and you are trying to get into financial services in a big way with a very large of customer touch points that they have already got. Now, between these two, do you see yourself having any kind of a disadvantage or handicap in competing in the marketplace?
So I think you're right that as of now, we do not have a deposit-taking license. Actually, the deposit-taking license of DHFL was suspended for its own reasons, which are very well known before we acquired it. We are hoping that as time goes by, I think the RBI would look at us favorably towards a deposit-taking license. But quite apart from that, I think the cost of funding, which other large competitors have, will be lower than ours for a while to come. Therefore, what we need to see is to go into those areas which are not so easily, which are not of great interest to the larger ones. And that's why I talked about the tier 2, tier 3. That's why I talked about the whole space of salaried and non-salaried. Fintech on the other side, yes, they bring in a lot of technology, which we are also trying to do. But if you look at the fintechs, most of them are not of the significant size and don't have the balance sheet that we would have. And very often they have a lot of technology, but not enough experience in lending and not enough of a balance sheet to do. So I think we have to be very aware of what the big boys are doing and what fintechs are doing, and we have to find a path. But I can say on the other hand, that there is a need to provide more housing. How many NBFCs are there in the housing space, for instance, or even in lending? There are very few. And over time, a consolidation is taking place. You can see there is a difference between the more successful or the larger ones, the NBFCs, compared to the smaller ones. So that's where we are playing.
Connected to this housing business, I want to ask you, because this whole housing and real estate market has been in the dumps for the last 7-8 years. But in the last 8-9 months, there is clear sign of some kind of revival after many years. I mean, you have a very large group company in real estate which your son runs. What is your sense? Do you think this real estate and housing turnaround is for real?
I think so. As you said, for the 8 years has been a really downward cycle in housing and has been affected by several things. At one time, there was a big, the cost of housing had really gone up. The land prices had gone up. And over time, we've had several challenges in this space, whether it was demonetization, whether it was RERA, GST, and COVID, and so on. But I think now things have turned out. Every business has to have a cycle. In a growth economy, real estate is important. And you're seeing it that this is taking place. What's also happened, the whole environment has changed today. Consolidation has taken place in this space, and which means that the bigger players are doing better and the marginal players in real estate have actually fallen by the wayside. Besides that, with the sort of interest rates have come down and as housing, I mean, some of the loans are like sub 7%, which is also a big plus. And prices of real estate haven't gone up over the last 4 or 5 years. So that means that the demand has come back. COVID has also helped in bringing up the demand. Actually, the people who have the higher income people, their savings have actually gone up. There's been hardly any travel in the last 2 years. There's been no spending on weddings, no spending on restaurants, and people have also realized that they want some more space at home. So all this has meant that actually uh, that there is a revival in demand, and I think this will continue for a while.
Mm. And your son Anand runs the real estate business. Well, how much of a mentoring hand do you place on his shoulder in the real estate arm? I mean, is it an arm which he's cutting his teeth in and basically earning some experience before you get him back into the main fold of Piramal Enterprises? Hand him the reins of finance and pharmaceuticals as well over time?
So what we're doing is, in terms of structure, we are actually now demerging our pharmaceuticals and financial services. So both, I think by the next 9 months, should be both independently listed on the stock exchanges. And as far as the pharmaceutical is concerned, my daughter Nandini, who has been in the business for now 13, 14 years, will be actually, and she's running it even today, will be continuing to run it and do so more independently. I'm fortunate that both my kids, Nandini and Anand, have graduated from the best schools in the world. One from Stanford has done her MBA. Anand has done it from Harvard, so they are good. And even as far as the financial services is concerned, actually Anand is taking now much more interest. And he is, so it's not that he's going to come into financial services, he's already in it.
So is that the succession plan in a way at the Piramal Group, that your son runs real estate and finance and daughter runs pharmaceuticals?
So in some ways, yes, it is. We are preparing them to take a larger responsibility in both, and that's what they're doing. Yeah.
And you have the very interesting, and may I say even in some quarters they would say enviable position of having Mukesh Ambani as Anand's father-in-law. I mean, I am always intrigued by, do you ever get together for a cup of coffee? Do you discuss business? What's your equation with him like?
So as Mukesh and I actually go a long way. We've been friends before our kids were born. So that's the good thing. So I think both of us have seen our children being born. He's seen Anand born, and I have seen Isha. So we have had a very close relationship, and this has only further cemented this union between Anand and Isha has only cemented it further.
And he's not the giant businessman that you have some kind of a tie or linkage with. You also have a big linkage with the Tata Group. I mean, you were on the board of Tata Sons at the time when Chandra took over, and you've had the perspective of seeing him work over the last many years. I mean, as somebody, as an insider almost, are you happy with the way Tata Sons is shaping up now under Chandra? Would you say he has your vote?
I think there's no doubt that, I mean, you don't need my ratification of what he's done. The markets say it, and you can see the business performance saying it. So I think it has been an exceptional performance over the last 5 years. And I think the situation when he did take over to what it is today, there's a material change. And that's obvious for all to see in every business.
You spoke a lot about how you took 20 years to build the pharmaceutical business. And of course, that is a completely fair assessment. But the one transaction which leads me more to the investor side of you is what you did with Vodafone. I mean, you bought an 11% stake. In a few years, you sold it off. Would you agree that that was a bit of a investor kind of transaction by your standards? And how do you read the Vodafone situation today with the way it's evolved? I mean, if you were holding those shares, how would you have felt?
No, so it was not a bit of an investor transaction. It was a totally investor transaction, whether it's from your viewpoint or mine. I think we are both aligned to that. And obviously, it is clear I mean, again, it's obvious that at that time, Vodafone was a different entity than what it is today. And it's pretty obvious that where Vodafone then was and now where it is.
How many more years do you see yourself doing this, Ajay? Because you are getting on, and these things can't be easy. You've built a very large empire for yourself. Your children are ready. How many years will it be when Ajay Piramal is sitting at Mahalakshmi Racecourse and watching the horses go by, and daughter and son are running the show?
So I still go to the Mahalakshmi race course and see the horses go by and sometimes sit on them as well and take my grandchildren. So that's not going to change. But yes, now over time, they will take over. I mean, in the near future, I would like that both my kids will take over the businesses. They are getting their teams ready. They've been working on it. And I hope the sooner it is, the better it is. I would like to do many more things in life.
What are those things, Ajay? Which is the nub of my question, because I believe that you are spiritually inclined. You spend a lot of time thinking about life and its many problems. What do you have in store? What have you got planned out for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years?
So I don't know how many years are left for anybody. But yeah, so I am spiritually inclined and I would want to do more of it. I do, do some reading. I take some lessons in it, but I'd like to do more about it. That's a very important part of my life. In addition, I think we have a foundation, and I would like to spend much more of my time on that. We are doing some significant work in it because, as they say, the first part of your life is to learn. The second part of your life is to earn, and then you have to return. So we've been trying to do that, and we have some really large goals to do in as far as our foundation is concerned. So we have, for instance, taken on the Prime Minister has identified 112 districts as what he calls the aspirational districts. These are the districts which are the most undeveloped. And if I may say, 16% of our population lives there. But the total CSR funding, only 1.5% goes there. So how can we improve this? So we are working with Niti Aayog, with the various state and central governments to do something there. We have a big thing on tribal health, which we have a tribal health collaborative with some of the largest organizations in the country. Every year, we are doing a fellowship of young fellows who are either graduates or postgraduates. This year, we've recruited 650. They work with us 24/7 for 2 years to become better leaders for a future India. So again, how do we give back and make India a progressive and a developed country? Some small contribution that we can do is what we want to do.
I wish you all the best with all those endeavors. Ajay, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always, and all my best wishes for the rest of your journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Udayan. Thank you.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.